Perfect. Okay, we need to call the meeting to order. I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Do you want us to say our name before we say our vote?
I think so, because that way I can keep track of who's there.
Yes, we would need to do that.
So Beth is an aye.
Pete is an aye.
Aaron is an aye.
Michelle's an aye.
What about the other John?
Dan, they can also go under manage participants and they can click yes or no and use the nonverbals as well.
Where are those, Holly? Never mind, my helper's pointing.
Yeah, next to the middle of your taskbar in the bottom where it says share, it says manage participants. If you click that, it'll bring up a menu of everyone over to the left. You can see who's on. And at the bottom, there's a yes and a no button. So you can give a nonverbal and it'll show up in the corner of your screen. So like I just clicked yes, and you can see the check marks. Anyone in the list that has a check mark, say clicked yes. And then you can click it again to uncheck it.
Perfect, thank you, Holly.
Yep.
The first, this is Beth. The first item on our agenda is the Memorandum of Understanding with the teachers. Dan, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes, I'm pulling it up on my computer. Give me a thumbs up if you see my screen. All right. The first thing that we talked about, one of the parts that we needed to take care of as a school district was we have a duty day length, which is 7 hours and 45 minutes for the teachers, and we define that in a certain way in our negotiated agreement. We had an excellent conversation with the LEA board. Aaron Edwards and his group of folks all zoomed in during spring break, and this is what we agreed upon. They've already signed it, so it's just awaiting board approval. We tried to make this as skinny as we possibly could, and it simply replaces our length of duty day article with teachers are expected to work their daily contracted time spread out over a weekly period. Flexibility will be expected by both the teacher and administration. And those conversations had to do with teaching time and when teachers would be available. And we wanted to have that be as, it's not going to be the case that teachers are available from 8 o'clock until 3:30 like a normal duty day, because it might be the case that they have a little one that they have to help with their own, school. And so the expectation is that we would spread that time over a weekly period. And that was, if they needed to give some weekend times, we encourage them to do that. They just needed to communicate with their teammates and with their parents. And by teammates, let's take the second grade as an example. Second grade teachers, the idea was that they would plan that together. There would be times, all times of the day when parents would be available that would fit into the parent schedule, and that would fit into the teaching schedule for that team. It was a very good conversation. I'd like to thank Aaron Edwards. I think he's on here for all of his work on that. The other thing that we decided that we wanted to do, and I know that there's been a couple of questions about expected to keep and turn in time logs. We did that purposely. And part of the reason that we wanted to make sure that we were keeping those time logs is I think this is an excellent opportunity as a educating world, that this is a time to show what teaching really entails. It is so much more than the time we spend in front of kids. It's communicating with families. It's planning. It is doing all of the things that we do as educators, and this was an opportunity for us to show that. Um, Understand on that, there are no sticks involved with this at all. It was meant to be that way because we will have people get sick through this process, and they aren't going to be able to fulfill that time requirements. And that's where the principals get to do their jobs and and show that they're having conversations somebody needs to be filled in for because they've gotten sick or a family member has, and we need somebody else to step up and help communicate with them. In no way, shape, or form are those time logs expected to be minute by minute, hour by hour type of things, but more of a, what did you do during the day and approximately how much time, did you do that? Almost all of our teachers have, um, for lack of a better term, office hours. And those office hours are times that parents can get a hold of them. Kids can get a hold of them at the high school in order to ask questions about the lessons. It's set up a time that they're on Zoom and they're sitting there and they're waiting for somebody to join and that happens to have a question. And the last part, and I think this is an important, as we move forward, the biggest thing that we talked about a lot is bridging a gap to a successful 2020-2021 school year. It's not really about these last 9 weeks that we care about as much as it is that when our kids come back in August, that they're able to have a successful school year next year. And I think that that's an important part and why we wanted them to keep those student contact logs is we want them to keep their student contact logs to make sure that all of our families that choose to engage in this process are engaged in the process. And I think that was an important part by teachers wanted that to show all of the time that they're spending and what kids that we're reaching. There was also some things in our continuous learning plan, that we continued to support our students that need more help, and we're going to do that by making sure that we communicate more and we offer more to them. And that's what the student contact logs are. It is nice, as I've talked to folks through KNEA, this is our MOU has been held up as something that is very good. And it's definitely a good start for us to have the flexibility for our teachers to do what they need to do and our administration to be able to support them. So with that, I'll mute myself and allow you guys to talk.
Any discussion?
Yeah, it's John Dalby here. Dan, I know you and I talked a little bit via text message about this. I'm a big believer in powering down. So I have worked from home for over a year now, and I'm a little concerned about time. It's some weeks it's going to require a teacher to commit 50 hours, and other weeks it may only be 20. And I personally trust our teachers to do the right things based on the needs of their students and the communication required with their parents. So I'm leaning more towards a task related. And you had brought up, well, we can't create a list of tasks, and that's not what I meant. What I mean is that let the principals, the department heads, the people that are in the trenches decide what makes sense for that day, that block, that week, whatever the case may be. Because it's just, as a work from home guy, it's impossible to just predict that you're going to be able to do 7:45. And I think you acknowledged that when you talked about a teacher having a sick child or something like that. I thank you for cleaning up the thing about the logs. At first, as I read it, I thought it showed a lack of trust, that whenever you require someone to keep track of something, that means that you're going to hold them accountable for it. And like I said a few minutes ago, I absolutely trust our teachers to do the right thing. They do it when they're in the buildings. They do it when they're working their additional duties. This organization has to be built on trust, and requiring someone to keep logs just so that there's some tracking mechanism. I just don't really agree with that at all. I wouldn't ask you, Dan, to do a log of your duty day. And then I'm just a little concerned about the final statement. I mean, other than it's in a different font, but the agreement will be binding for 1 year. When does our current negotiated agreement end? And then that's probably when that should end and not be carried out through a year, just to make sure that we're legally keeping our school years linked together. Thank you.
The negotiated agreement it continues from year to year. It doesn't have an ending period. That's what we end up doing through negotiations. The MOU, we typically set those sunset dates for a year, just because that will cover us. And in this case, I think there's a good chance, not a good chance, there's a chance that this will continue at least through the summer and through the start of the next school year. So at any point in time, we can go back to the table on the MOU. And obviously, if we're back to school as normal, we meet with the association again, and we can take care of that through cancellation of the MOU. We just didn't want to sunset too early, so we didn't have to keep coming back to that meeting place. As for the comments about the trust of folks, that is a large part of the conversations that we had. Like I said, the largest thing that we wanted to be able to show, a couple things. Number one, Mary Alice does have some time issues with the SPED department, that if we keep logs of when they are working, there's a chance that we'll be audited on those at some point in time, and we wanted to make sure those are covered. Like I said, in no way, shape, or form, when we had these conversations, like if we were going to put any accountability measures, those would have been in the MOU, and that's where the line up above of the flexibility comes in. And I think that that's an important part. We absolutely understand in these times that people are going to give us everything that they have, and if not, because they can't for whatever reason, we keep moving the ship forward with those that can be on the ship. So that was our understanding, and us and the teachers. Aaron actually wrote the MOU. We felt really good about that. So any other comments?
I think in a lot of ways, John, this is Beth. I think in a lot of ways, John, that you guys are all saying the same thing, and that's that we trust our teachers and we know they're working their tails off. I know the teachers I know have put in closer to 150 hours than 40 trying to get ready to roll. But I think you guys are saying basically the same thing. We trust our teachers and we know they're doing everything in their power to do what needs to be done.
I have a comment. Is this a state requirement that we annotate logs? Is Leavenworth doing it? Is Piper doing it?
It is not a state requirement. This was a conversation between us and our teachers association. They left the continuous learning plan that we'll talk about in just a little bit. They left that open to us. Like I said, the things that we discussed, and this was a week and a half ago, and there have been a few things change since then, and is we still don't have all of the answers on what the SPED requirements are from the feds. They've changed a few things over the last week, but all of that is still in flux. And as we talked about, part of it is there is no state requirement. They left that very open for the very reason that they believe in local control. I'm sure if we need to remove that, we just have to go back and talk to the teachers. This was what the administration and the teachers talked about, and we were happy with that. So.
Dan, for all the reasons that you and Beth both mentioned, that teachers are already working their tails off. I don't see a reason to ask them to add more to their day by asking them to do logs.
I do have one question about the student log could become important at some point in time for us. And the reason is that with the student log, with the special education piece, there could be some compensatory issues that we have to come back if we can't meet all of the IEP meeting, all of the IEP minutes. And if that is the case, a student log could be extremely important when we have to come back and offer more services when we get back into session, because they have not relaxed any of, if the parent says, I need 30 minutes of time, because that's what's on the IEP, and we have a hard time meeting that through our issue, we're going to need to be able to show and log the fact that we've tried to do that. So in that case, I believe that the student log, in my opinion, is obviously much more important than the teaching time log. And I'm sure if we want to mark off the teaching time log, we could do so. But in my opinion, I think the student contact log is going to be important for a couple reasons. We have already had some of that also. One is, did we contact you? And we end up with lots of those conversations very early on. So.
Is it possible for SPED to log what they're doing with students without the teachers doing full-time logs?
We could. My only question to that would be is that sometimes that reg ed teachers contact, if they have inclusion minutes, that reg ed conversation could come in, because you could have a para actually in the Zoom meeting. And then at that point in time, if you're going to have the special education teachers doing it, at some point in time, I think it would make sense in my world, but my world's sometimes wrong, that others would go ahead and do that also.
Question, this is Aaron Yoakum. So I'm getting that it's the IEP stuff and linking that to make sure that we don't have any issues with it, but at what point will we know from the state that, hey, they're going to just let that piece roll? And at that point, could we remove that? I get understanding to keep it in there now so that we're covering ourselves as a district with our special education students and moving forward on that, especially with inclusion as well as pull-out time. How are we doing pull-out time with special ed? Are they zooming in and counting those times for their minutes? At what point will we get an answer from the state on when they're going to pull those requirements and change them slightly, as we're in uncharted territory?
It's actually a federal requirement, not a state requirement. And so your guess is as good as mine. Exactly. Those things have changed 3 times in the last week and 4 times. So when we start to talk about the plan, I'll tell you as soon as we have the next pandemic and we do this again. So at best, that's as good as answer as I have right now. The other part, so when we did have conversations with the teachers, the other part is to actually show how much, as I mentioned before, teachers do, and I think that is part of it, that we, the other thing, and we'll post this, and everybody's term will be up there, our opinions, but the other part of that is we have had lots of challenges from our own legislators about how much teachers work. Why are you paying somebody that isn't working? And I think that was part of our conversation when we were having our discussion, is to be able to, we can post all of this. Our continuous learning plan will be posted. This is what a teacher does each and every day. And I think that there's an opportunity here also. Like I said, unfortunately, when we have conversations with our own commissioner of education and they make comments about being challenged from across the street, those are real things in our world. But I'm okay with absolutely anything that you want to do. I'm trying to explain the conversation that we had with our teachers organization. As an LEA, they were happy with what we came up with, and we had lots of those conversations. And if you want to relax those, I'm sure it won't take much to have Aaron and his group look back at it. And maybe they want to keep a log. I would guess that they would shake their head no, but.
This is Beth. Dan, when you're talking about a time log, you're not talking about at 8 a.m. I did this, at 9 a.m. I did that. You're talking about more of a generic, these are the things I did today. So it's just kind of a list. So it kind of looks more like the tasks.
I believe that would suffice for me.
And it wouldn't need to say something like, for 2 hours, I did this or that.
No.
Just kind of a basic list.
The other part of that is that they all have Zoom office hours that they're already putting in, so many hours a week. I mean, those are obviously things that are already on there. It would simply be a task, like John said, a task list with times, approximate times of how much time did I spend on that for the week. Understanding that there's no sticks and or carrots about that.
Dan, who's going to be, let's say you have 150 teachers, who's going to be going back and looking at the logs? If they spend the time to create the logs, who's going to be looking at them?
Those things are tasked to the principals and or the special education folks. The other thing that a log does end up doing, and you mentioned accountability, is let's say that at some point in time, a middle school teacher, I see Carrie's face there, and a middle school teacher has just fallen off and not done anything. Having that task log at some point in time does allow us to contact them and say, hey, I see that you haven't checked in on your kids for 3 or 4 days. Are you doing okay? You would hope that you wouldn't have to do that during this time, but it does give us that flexibility also, as unfortunately there is still a contract that is involved there, and I think that does give us some pieces as an admin team. Like I said, there's no sticks there. It doesn't say what we will do with it other than have a conversation. So.
This is Beth. John, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I understand what he's saying. I think we're kind of caught here, because if the driver is to be able to present data someday to local or state government saying, look at how much our teachers are doing, then these lists are going to have to be pretty detailed, or they won't hold any water. So if that's what we're leaning towards, then I agree with Pete that now we're giving these guys and gals another task to do. We're signing up the principals to go through 150 of these things, which I'm telling you right now, if I was a principal, I wouldn't do it. So
Wouldn't either.
I just trust the teachers. I trust the principals that these kids are going to do what they need to be doing, and we don't need to force them to do logs. I do appreciate the discussion though, because I think that Dan brings up a great point about the student contact logs, especially when you're dealing with IEPs. And sometimes, in this environment, it is going to be hard for a teacher to squeeze 8 hours out of the day. So keeping track of any phone call, which is, what most professionals do. Anytime when they pick up a phone, they start writing notes, and they kind of know when and the conversation happened and what they talked about, so that there's reference. So I'm comfortable with the student contact logs, but yeah, I just don't understand the time logs. We're either going to sign our teachers up for a significant task so we can take it to state legislature, or we should just back off and let them not do that. So that's my stance.
Because we do need the special ed stuff. I think that's going to come back. I think parents also are going to expect to see that. Maybe what we do is have the MOU say specifically for student contact. And that's what they track.
So you'd like us to take out the teacher hour part?
Yeah, I think I think that's going to become a nuisance if it's not going to be valuable. But I do understand with the SPED stuff, we've got to have the student contact information, and maybe the paras need to keep track of when they zoom into a class, they need to write down which classes they've zoomed into.
We can make that change and take it to the teachers. I assume it won't be an issue. But if so, we can bring the MOU back to you at the next month also. This is a two-sided thing that, you know, we both have to agree to. So
I think that would be good. So can we table it without a motion, or do we need to have a motion to table it and you take it back and have them look at it?
I would make the change that you want and approve it as changed, and then they can choose to accept it or not. I don't envision it being a problem to be accepted if we just want to. I'm going to share my screen real quick. We can take this part out and just leave the part in the blue. Teachers will be expected to keep and turn in time logs, and we can take that part out and take it back to them. And then if they don't approve it, I have to bring something back to you anyway. So we can make a motion to approve it as amended, and taking out the teachers will be expected to keep and turn in time logs. And at that point in time, we could approve it as a board and take it to them. And if they choose to accept that, then it would be binding. If they choose to want that back in or add something else, then we would have to come back to you. But we have another board meeting very soon anyway. So
right. I move that we accept the MOU as amended.
I'll second that. This is Pete.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, hey, this is kind of an OCD thing. Could you make sure that all those fonts and match? Just looks a little bit more professional. Sorry.
Sure, I'll have. Like I said, I had Aaron sent that to me, so we'll make sure it looks good.
All in favor, say aye or push your button.
Aye. Pete.
Dalby, aye.
Aaron, aye.
Is John Haddock out there?
I just unmuted him. I see him on here, but I don't hear him. So that part I'm not 100% sure of.
Okay, well, the motion passes because there's 5 yeses and no John. So when we come back, you can let us know if they've accepted that once you talk to them. The next thing on the agenda is the resolution to pay classified staff members. Dan?
This is one that will just cover us depending on what happens with our classified staff. The part of the waiver process was in order to receive the waiver, for the time we have to have 1,116 hours. In order to call ourselves a school year. We are asking to waive everything that we have not done so far as of, I believe it was March 13th. We'll get to that when we go to the continuous learning plan. And we're asking for the waiver of that. There were two things that you had to do in order to have the waiver. The first is that you would develop a continuous learning plan. And the second is that you would pay all of the people, classified and or hourly people that that you have on your books. And so what this does is this will cover us if for whatever reason, let's say, and you never really know what is going to happen. I don't envision this happening from the state, but let's say that for whatever reason that we have to come and make up some time, which I don't believe we will have to. But if our waiver doesn't get approved and or the state comes back and says that, you know, that you have to make up X amount of time, like I said, I don't envision that happening. But what this will do, and this is the important part down below. It is further understood that the event, the Kent State Board of Education requires your above days to be made up after the end of the regular school term, that the pay received by employees during the school closing will serve as advance payments, and that no additional payments are due for pay previously granted. The largest part on that is if for whatever reason that I need people to work. Let's say that this continues, and it is the case that I have needs into the month of June for things that are school related, that I can have those hourly folks make up some of that time that I've already paid them. I feel really good about what we're doing as a district with our hourly employees. Number one is that if anybody feels like they shouldn't come to work because they feel unsafe or whatever the case might be, we're making sure that we accommodate that. I think at this point in time, the anxiety is rather high across the nation on what this is really doing. And I don't envision us, as John mentioned earlier, our folks are going to do what they need to do. But what this does is I can't afford, if I have to have people work in June, I can't afford to pay them twice. And I think that this definitely covers the board. And we've, you know, the greatest thing that we have is our own bus drivers, is because every conversation we've had with the Commissioner of Education has involved, you pay your bus contractor, and it's, you know, we've taken care of all of our folks, all the way down to subs that had been contracted long term, and those that were already on the books. We paid those the days that we knew that they were already contracted for. So I feel really good about that, but this does protect the board if we have to have that in the future. And I'm going to mute myself.
This is Beth. I move that we approve the resolution to pay the classified staff members as presented.
Second.
This is Pete. I say yay.
All in favor, say aye. Or
Aye.
vote with your machine.
Galby, aye. I don't know if
Aye.
my phone's working.
Peter.
Oh.
Yoakum, aye.
Michelle, I.
Okay, that's 5 ayes, so motion passes. And then we're on, Dan, to our continuous learning plan.
Can you hear me now? All right.
I can hear you, can't see you, but I hear you.
Lots of thanks to Dr. Holly Becker. She compiled all of this off of what our principals all compiled, and Mary Alice compiled. This is our waiver and what we're asking the state to actually do. And so I know that, one, these are due by April 8th. So I'm looking for this to be approved tonight with any minor changes. But I do need it to be approved so we can get it in, because if you don't get it in by April 8th, the next state board meeting is later. So they
Hey,
asked,
Dan, we can't see it.
Go.
You've got your Zoom thing is up on top of it.
my Zoom thing. Hold on. Let's try.
I could see it just fine, Dan. I think you need to drag your Zoom window, Beth, out of the way. You can drag the bar to the top or to the side out of your way in your own.
There we go. Thank you.
Excellent. So this is what we're actually asking the State Board of Education to do. We've been in school for 860 hours, and we're requesting that 256 hours of those be waived for a total of 1,116 hours. And then you note that a continuous learning plan must be submitted as part of this waiver. As I mentioned below, these are the assurances that we're doing when we ask for the waiver, that we'll have a continuous learning plan, that what this is, that we're going to ask you to approve, and then the state board assures that it will pay all current hourly employees during the balance of the 1920 school year, and approved by the local Board of Education, which we just did. We assure that it will send the continuous learning plan, which we'll do as soon as we get this approved on or before April 8th. We assure that the state board, it will enroll all new students according to state statute. We haven't had any of those currently, but if we happen to have a kid need to enroll, we have those links on our website that people would be able to grab. And it will apply a health and safety policy limiting the opportunity for students, staff, and families to be exposed to potential pathogens that could lead to illness. Our local health department and our governor is taking care of that for us. The other thing is that there's been lots of talk about us being able to have folks in our buildings, and we've gone almost all digital with all of our meetings. I am sitting in my office. I'm the only one infecting my office, and so that is okay. But there's lots of talk about bringing people in 10 at a time or 9 at a time, and cohesive groups, and we just simply aren't interested in that. We'll make our conversations as we talked through phone calls, through Zoom meetings, those type of ways, and if we have to, we'll communicate in that manner. So I'm going to go down a little bit, and this is on board docs also. We uploaded that this afternoon. We had to lay out our professional development plan for continuous learning. District-wide, we had DLT meetings. We had BLT meetings at every level. We had asynchronous, which are different time, and synchronous happen at the same time meetings. We made sure that we laid those out at the DLT to make sure that those that couldn't meet during a certain time had opportunities, and those that were they needed that personal contact were able to do that. So these are all of our meetings that we had in order to lay out our professional development plan. The next question was, describe how you'll ensure continuous learning is available for every student. We've worked really hard in the last 2 days, handing out iPads to K through 5 students and 6 through 12 students. Our teachers have done an excellent job of communicating with parents, making sure that they have what they need in order to start this on Monday. In some cases, we maybe did a little too good a job of communicating, as I think we caused a little anxiety in the community about what all this was going to be. But we made sure that those that had access would have lessons electronically. We also made sure that we had set up some outdoor opportunities for Wi-Fi, thanks to Mike Williams and Drew Barba and Colin Gooden, making sure that all worked. So we have those areas for our families that maybe don't have internet access. Some of our local businesses have also stepped up. And then for those that simply can't do it electronically, we did make packets of information, and that's what some of those call-in times could be for parents that don't have access, is that they could call in and actually, okay, this is what I'm working with, and we could help to talk them through. we handed out a lot of iPads in the last couple of days, K-5. Will online learning be used? Yes, it will be. Tech support is being offered in a couple of ways. Number one, it's provided by teachers. All of the groups that kind of have a tech lead person. We have some teachers that have stepped up and are helping with some of the side of what does this look like in education, which is entirely different than what Drew and Colin do on the tech side of things. Holly has done an excellent job, tech support helping with a lot of our Zoom questions. If you can't tell, she's extremely good at this. And she has helped send some things out on the internet and on Facebook in order to have that resource. We've even used some of our PTA contacts to make sure to get that word out, which has been excellent. Ensure that all students have adequate access to devices and internet. It reiterates the things that we've already talked about with the iPad part, with the free internet and the community, at our own schools, at the library, Spectrum stepping up, and I know that there have been people get on with them and with AT&T. One of the things that we do struggle with are those that live out in the county that don't have that as much. And it might be the case that they'd be the ones that ask for packets. It might be the case that I did look at providing devices for them. At this point in time, they're about $250, or they're $25 a month with a 12-month requirement. So you're looking at about $300 per device. At this point in time, you're looking at spending for 30 devices, which wouldn't get about $9,000. And so at that point in time, I think with the other things that we have, and unfortunately, like out where I live, unless you have internet through one of the local providers, your AT&T Wi-Fi hotspot isn't going to do you a whole lot of good. Describe additional measures you'll take to support students with disabilities. This is a rather lengthy one, mainly because we have a lot of things that go into all of those different things with students with disability and students served under title programs, ELL and migrant. And we tried to hit on all of those. There's a lot of information in this. The largest part, and Mary Alice has talked with her staff, is communicating with the parents on what they want to see happen through that IEP process. And that's going to be the largest thing that our SPED staff can do, is making sure to have those communications of, what is it what goals do you want us to reach the most with your students? And I think that is an important part of that. And if they say, I want the IEP exactly as the IEP is written, we're going to try our best to do that. And our best effort is the best that we can do. Eligibility meetings. We still have IEP meetings that we're required to do, and we still have the expectation that we will have our evaluations done within 60 school days. Those are things that have not been changed by the federal government, and so all of those issues that we're dealing with, we'll continue to have to deal with. How will teachers check in with students? All of our buildings had different ways that they're doing that. Communicate weekly with families, establish a community Facebook at the elementary school, the early childhood, checking in families regularly, and they also use Seesaw. Conduct student needs assessment at the intermediate school. Student contact logs and contact with students and their families. Middle school is having their advisory teacher contact students at least once a week through a phone call. We'll have live lessons and opportunities for kids to check in. And the other key part of that is that when we don't have people checking in, we'll call and make sure that everything's okay. This one is an interesting one about our career and technical ed classes at the high school. Teachers are utilizing video capabilities and model new procedures. And a perfect example was the culinary arts. And to make sure that we are teaching the skills and the techniques that we need um, in order to do that. And CT is very competency based. It will be difficult for Glenn Rosario in order to teach a Woods class during that time, but if nothing else, those folks are very creative in the way that they're going to be teaching all of those competencies. This is one that I know that a lot of folks in our community are talking about. Seniors will receive credit on graduation, and I see this as two different parts. Graduation is all about passing the amount of credits that we need them to pass, which in Lansing School District is 23. And I had sent something out, if you remember, about some people are lowering that to the state requirement of 21. Luckily, our policy is already written that we have that ability from the superintendent and from the principal level that we can waive those. And I think I talked with Mr. McKim, and if his video wasn't frozen, he'd nod his head and say that we want that freedom for us to be able to work with them instead of lowering everybody to 21. We want to be able to use that when we need to and not have to do that in all cases. And that was he and I working together to make sure. One of the most exciting things, social and emotional supports that we have. This is a trying time for all folks, and we're going to make sure that our counselors and social workers are doing what we need to do, providing check-ins with families, making sure that if they need extra supports, if they need community resources, that's a large part that our social workers deal with. And we have a good plan on all of that. I know that group has worked hard in order to get some things together for people that need some help. Everything down to, I know that group has also talked about helping parents. This is going to be an interesting time for parents, and giving some resources for them in order to be able to help their students work and work at home. These first 2 weeks are going to be great because everybody's going to be excited about doing it. We'll check in at our April 13th board meeting, and my conversation might change just a little bit. And so, but I think that this, a great opportunity. We've had these conversations with this group about something that they wanted to start next year anyway, being able to reach out to parents and giving some of those. And so this will kind of give us a kickstart. Family communication and community communication. We're doing all of those things. We've tried to send out a lot of updates. We've changed that a little bit. Holly's done some Facebook live things for our teachers and for our staff and for our community. We've been trying to send out daily updates or every other day updates, and have a frequently asked questions that will just continue to roll through. We have feedback. We have surveys from families we've sent out. We'll continue to do that. We want to make sure that we do that enough and not overwhelm collecting information. We wanted to make sure if they needed a device, if they had internet. The next question that we'll be asking is, do you need food? And make sure, especially as people get laid off and that becomes an obstacle. Facilitate learning at home. We talked about those. Send iPads, Wi-Fi service. We gave packets when we needed to. Continue to have conversations with them. Frequent district-wide communication will occur, and please describe the measure we'll take in collaboration with your local community health. We've been in continuous contact with him. I actually sent Jamie an email this morning on some clarification on somebody who wanted to use one of our facilities for something, and we take his lead with that, and it's been a great partnership, and he's done an excellent job of making sure that we're staying safe as a community. One thing that I should have mentioned when we first started this is the state really wanted this to be as succinct as possible, and not with a ton of detail about all of the things that you're doing, but just how are you planning on making sure that your community is served. And we have more documents that I can send out at the end of the week as we have them. But this is they said a paragraph or two about the things that you're doing, and that's what we really tried to do. And when I say we, Holly put all this together, thankfully. Thank you very much. I'm muting.
Approve the continuous learning plan as presented.
Just a little discussion first. I want to applaud not only Dan and Holly, but everybody in the district. This has been a huge effort, especially to the teachers. I mean, I know that they put the plan together, but then it takes the teachers to make it work. And I know personally how many hours they put in getting this all set. So I just want to make a comment that, as a citizen in Lansing, we appreciate everything they do. That's all I got.
Absolutely.
This is Aaron. I know this is going to sound, are we meeting our needs of our hearing impaired? I'm looking at Zoom and the teachers are talking about Zoom and stuff like that. That's all live feed. How are we dealing with hearing impaired?
This is Beth. Zoom has built-in captions.
Okay.
This is John. I have a few questions. So in this continuous learning plan, the questions that were highlighted in yellow, were those generated by the state, or was those just headers that you chose, Dan or Holly?
Those were the questions that we had to answer as a part of the
Okay.
continuous learning plan.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'll have to be honest with you, Dan. I didn't have a lot of time to read this today, so I only got through about half of it before we had to start the meeting. So I guess my one question is I know I'm asking you to go into a little bit of detail here, but something I didn't see here is how are you handling the PK to first graders? Because I saw that everybody looked like second grade and above grabbed the iPads, but how are you addressing the PK to 1?
We do have, and Mary Alice sent the list of those that needed those resources the other day. They can check out a device also or internet,
Okay.
not internet, but a device in order to do that. And then they also have Packet Learning that they have some documents that they can send out also. And then the other part of the pre-K obviously is that most of that ends up being the case that they'll work with the parents in order to make sure to provide the services that we have.
Okay.
Good question.
Thanks. And then I saw you mentioned in there that the para educators are still being included. That's great. Those give you some manpower to do some task, but also to keep in touch with those kids, with going back to the discussion about contact hours and tracking sheets. Okay.
One of the great conversations I sat in on the paraprofessional Zoom that Mary Alice had, and Lori Geis, who's our second grade SPED teacher. She said it very well, that as the teachers start this week and we start this continuous learning plan for all of our students, the biggest role of the SPEDs and teachers and the paras this next week is to see how they can support the learning. It's just like starting a new school year, and that.
Yeah.
It is absolutely amazing to hear them talk about the way that they support, they modify, and they uplift the kids each and every day. The other part is that the paraprofessionals are assigned by their case manager, their lead teacher there, and they make sure that those paras already had a relationship with those kids, so they could, when they call home and they can help. It's really nice to hear those conversations happen. So
yeah. So are all 2,400 plus of our kids getting a Zoom experience like this once a day, Monday through Friday, so that, because you brought up a great point about the isolation effect of this pandemic. So first, is that what's happening? So that there's an adult that's saying, okay, this kid looks like he looks healthy, he's not malnourished, he's attentive.
The teachers set up their schedules on what would work for them. So I can't say that it would be once a day.
Okay.
It might be twice a week, along with some other opportunities that if we need to make sure that that they have check-ins that they need to do. And I think that part is, we talked about freedom of what fit into teacher's schedule. We allowed them to do that. Because it might be the case that on Wednesday, you have a student that you have to make sure that you have that you check in with, because they have other meetings, and so it wouldn't be every day. The other part is I think it's also important to realize that it's not going to be the case that parents can have their kid on Zoom each and every day and try to make sure that they have other things in their life during this time. The recommendations as a part of this, it wasn't the case that, the high school, they expected about 30 minutes per class per day, or about 3.5 hours. And then that worked all the way down to where kindergartners actually had about 30 minutes a day of learning. And I think that's the part that we have to understand, that education obviously is extremely important, but in the scheme of life right now, that there's going to be some people that this is going to be extremely difficult for.
Yeah. I agree with all your assessments. I don't think it's the responsibility of this governing body, the Board of Education, to dictate, hey, teacher X, we want you to check in with each kid this many times. But I would ask that you and your team kind of take a look at that, as, based on, well, I'll just go back to a discussion I had with Rob McKim not too long ago, and I've seen a lot of great work from Kerry on his social emotional reports, as well as being in the class, being in the halls when kids are passing, helps them feel loved, safe, what have you. So if you guys wouldn't mind having that discussion, and just let us know in a week or two what that looks like, to direct the teachers, hey, if you haven't seen or heard from a kid in this many times, that whatever that time is, please check up on them. For example, the United States Air Force Academy is locked down right now. The senior class, they've had 2 suicides. Those are adult men and women with higher cognitive ability, and they're starting to get freaked out right now. So that's 3.5 hours of contact time with the kid in the high school. But if I'm just asking that you guys lean into that like you have. Thank you. That's all my questions. Thank you.
If we can vote to approve, that would be amazing.
I need a second.
Beth, you might need to redo. I think you were maybe muted.
There's a motion on the table. I need a second to approve this.
This is Pete. I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aaron Yocum, aye.
Peter Ray Robinson, aye.
Michelle McQuillan, aye.
It's John Dalby, aye. I was expecting the fired up Pete.
Beth Stevenson, aye. Okay, so motion passes. Now, one of the things I wanted to revisit is the executive session policy. And this is something we've talked about quite a bit lately. And what I would like to talk about is how we handle this during this time period. Obviously, as this goes on, the likelihood of this being over anytime soon is very small. It's possible, but it's unlikely. It's going to be July at the soonest. I would be surprised if it happens before then. And so I think we need to have some mechanism of being able to go into executive session. And that leaves us with two options. We either all get in the same room together, or we have a meeting online. Discussion?
I do want to add one thing is the Zoom that we're in, it does have a breakout room. And what we can do with that is we can move all of us into that breakout room. And before we had an executive session, we'd probably want to practice that in order to make sure that Dan knows what he's doing. But I have my co-host, Holly, over here that knows how to do that. I don't know, Holly, if you can just show them what that'd look like real quick. This is a pop quiz that Dan would fail on his own. If she could just pop us all into a room and you'd see us all be in there. Give her 1 second. Sorry, Holly, I should have told you I was going to do that.
As co-host, you're gonna have to name me host.
All right, no problem there.
If you do that quick, then I'll do that.
All right, Holly Becker. Make host. Change host. There she is.
Okay, I'm gonna just randomly generate just so you can get an experience. You'll be in all different rooms. Is that okay? Or do you want me to put all the board members in one room?
No, you could
Okay.
put us all into separate rooms and
Okay.
know that we could put as many people into that.
And you can assign specific people. Okay, so in just a second, I'm creating the breakout rooms. I'm gonna open it and you'll get a notification on your screen to join. Please click join room. Doing good in here?
Doing good.
All right, I'm gonna go to room 3 here.
All right.
So that's what the breakout room experience is like. And so what you can do is we can pre-assign for the board members. And since Dan's the host, he can go into any room he wants, but we could just assign the board members to go in. And that would allow anyone else who is attending the board meeting to still hang out in the room and wait for you to come back and finish up the meeting. Do you have questions on that?
Where's everybody else?
They have, when I shut down the breakout room, they have 60 seconds to leave. Sometimes participants won't hit leave, and that's okay, because once the clock runs down to 0, it actually closes all the breakout room and forces everyone to come back out in the main session.
Nice. If you could only do that in a real classroom.
Yeah, we were joking actually that you can click mute all, and it's pretty fantastic. You can't do that in person.
Yeah.
So I think everybody's back. That would be the option that we have for executive session. I think it would work well if that's the way you choose to go. then I'm going to mute myself. Holly, you're still the host, so I don't know if I have to do anything.
So I'm going to take us on this walk. And I know you all are expecting it. So why did we approve this policy in the first place?
This is Beth. Can you hear me? Perfect. As a rule, I would much prefer we did not do this because I think executive session needs to happen face-to-face in a room where confidentiality can be maintained. I also think we have to be somewhat flexible. I don't really want to rehash the why we didn't do this in the past, because I still feel exactly the same way and it's going to launch the same discussion we've had twice now. But I do agree that at least for now, this is the option we need to go with.
Well, you know, Beth, I respect your thoughts on not wanting to rehash it, but the arguments that were made were arguments about the security of the information that was being passed and the importance of protecting our employees. That hasn't changed. That risk, I never thought it existed, but unless something has happened, according to the 4 or 5 people who voted for this policy, that risk still exists. So if that risk still exists, then it makes no sense for us to withdraw this policy, because in your sound mind and body as a trusted board member, several of you voted for this because you thought of what was best for the district, though it did isolate an elected member of the board from being able to carry out his duties. And I might add, during those discussions, I think Dan and I both said that, hey, this is something that we could regret in the future when we come to some kind of a scenario like this. So it really just looks like, even more so, that there was intent to isolate me individually to ensure that I was not involved in executive session and subsequently in the selection of the superintendent.
I still think those security things exist. I'm still very concerned about them. I don't like not doing this in person. I don't think it's a good idea. And it had absolutely nothing to do with you. The same with the superintendent. At that point, you were in town, but not in a position to participate. Just like last month, I wasn't able to be there. I was not in a position to participate, and I didn't because I couldn't be there. It's not, this in no way is about you.
So our employees no longer deserve that security that you wanted to afford them last month.
They totally do. But I'm willing to go with the group if the group feels that that's what we need to do. I'm also willing to go be in a room and we sit 6 feet apart if we need to do that.
I'm willing to do that. I'm just tired of going back and forth here. We've made a policy. Let's stick by it. And if that means we got to go another month before we go to executive session, so be it then. But this back and forth makes us look like crap, tell you the truth, like a bunch of 2-year-olds fighting over something, in my opinion. And so the vote was 4-3 or 5-2 or 4-2, whatever it was. We made a decision. We voted on it twice in December and January with new members. Let's stick by it. So all executive session stuff is done until we can meet in person. And if that shuts the district down, so be it.
I do have one thing, as every once in a while on the superintendent listserv, There are questions about, hey, how do you guys do executive session? And there are school districts in the world that do executive session about twice a year. Because here, as I believe that we've had conversations before, you are the final say on the hiring process, but you're not actually in that hiring process. And so a lot of the things that we do talk about in executive session do end up being things, these are the folks that we're going to hire this month. And if it is the case, as it should be in Dan's little world, that you trust the people that are doing the hiring, those are things that we don't need an executive session in order to do that. Obviously, there are things that we have to talk about in terms of our personnel, but those are things that can wait in most of the time. The interpersonal issues that we all might have at times that we discuss or need to discuss, most of those are also not going to be the case that with a COVID-19 separation, or the case that we're going to have a lot to discuss. I don't believe anyway. So I did want to mention that there are many school districts that don't have executive sessions every month, and because they simply don't need them every month. And just my half cent.
Thanks, Dan.
I have a
Kind of
comment.
our culture to do it every month, though.
I understand both John Dalby and John Haddock's position. However, from the very beginning, even when I was a citizen sitting in a seat in the audience, I just thought that if we as a group need to make a decision, we need to be able to make that decision, regardless of whether we meet in person or online or on Snapchat or whatever there is. I would not be opposed to going into executive session using this program. But I do echo what I said previously. I don't see why we didn't do it back in December, and I definitely don't understand why we didn't do it in January. But my vote would be for allowing us to continue to do our job on a monthly basis under any circumstance, not just the pandemic, but being allowed to do this online.
Michelle?
Yes.
No comment?
Do you have anything you want to add?
I think at this point, like I said, I think I'm going to agree with like John Haddock. I think if we're going to keep it, we need to keep it. I still feel the same way. I feel I don't think we need to be undoing it. Just if we can wait, we can wait. That's if we can. I mean, that's where I stand.
Aaron?
I would agree also with John that
Which John?
if we weren't John Haddock, if we kept it twice, I don't think we should change it. If security is the issue, then security is not, it hasn't changed. It's still the issue.
Okay.
Well,
Then
let me just throw in here. So I didn't agree with this policy from the beginning, because I do understand risk mitigation. It's one of the things that I've done for a living for a long time. And I thought that the threat that was indicated by some of the board members is non-existent. There is nobody who sits outside of our board room and listens to the doors. There's nobody who sits in the parking lot with a police scanner trying to pick up our conversations. There's nobody that's hacking into Dan's office so that they can listen. So though it would be very potentially disruptive and maybe catastrophic if somebody sued us because we were talking about them and it got out, The likelihood of that happening is extremely small. And that's what risk mitigators do. They look at likelihood of risk and look at and compare it to what the potential risk would result in. So I think that from the very beginning, the policy was weak, and that under every circumstance, this is where I'm going to jump on Beth's bandwagon. I think that we should be in a position to move this district forward. And if we have to do it during one of these platforms that's electronic, we can do that. We can secure that stuff. We have the capability to do it, and we need to arm Dan to do his job to lead this district. And if we got to go to an executive session on some kind of an IT platform so he can move forward, then why would we ever want to slow him down? So though I am very disappointed in those of you that supported this policy, you know what? I still love you. I think we're generally a good team, but I think generally we made a mistake. So I'm with you, Beth. I think if you want to do this, if you want to have executive session via the computer so that we can enable Dan to move forward, then I'm for that. But I also I really, really think that we should look at the option of meeting in person so we can see each other's body language, we can hear each other's voices, we can really get the feeling for what's going on. And you know what? Leaders put themselves at risk. That's what leaders do. And if we've got to put ourselves at risk to lead this district better, then I'm all for it. Let's do that. Thank you.
I think this is Beth, am I unmuted? I think that given the feelings for where they are, I think we leave it alone. And then we move on to the next thing, which is the selection of a new board member. Dan, you want to talk about what we have available?
Yes. Let me share my screen. Oh, let me go to, I don't have a thing on that. All right. We had 7 candidates that returned applications, and I have those ready to send out to you. You had asked to have those today, and I can email those out. I think the process that you all need to decide on is: are you going to pull those people in? Are we going to do it electronically? Are we going to sit in a room? If we choose to sit in a room, realize that this is an open meeting, and we're going to have to contend with the 10-person meeting piece, or 10-person in a room piece. And I might need to ask Jamie Miller and make sure that we can do that if we have more than that, because what we would have to do is you all would be the 6, I would be 7, Danielle would be 8, and then we could have 2 more folks in the room. So if those interviews all have to be open to the public, and so we would set up a Zoom possibly in order for everybody to be able to watch remotely, and then those folks that are a part of that process, if you choose to interview them, and that's still out there on exactly what you're going to do in order to pick that person, that's a board decision. There's no rules to how this is going to happen, by the way. But if you choose to interview each of them, and that's kind of the path I went down, we would have to, at the board office, set up locations for those that are here in order to watch all of that, because we will need to make sure that access is available. All of, like we've said before, all of that information from our KASB attorney is open session, including the deliberation. And so we're going to have to be able to communicate that way. in open session for those, because they are considered elected officials. So that's one, if you choose to interview all of them. The other part is if any other board members have any other ways that they'd like to select that person, you can discuss them at this point in time. We did just have an election, and obviously we have people that were voted for. We do have some members that threw their hat in the ring, that are not, that did not run for the board. So with that, if you have other questions of me, I'm here to answer them, but this is really a board discussion. If we choose to come together, we could do it all electronically. We could be in a room, realize that in a week, all of that could change. And so I think we need to have a contingency plan if they say that we can't meet at all, which could happen. And like I said, I didn't ask that question specifically of Jamie. I know he's really busy right now also. On a personal level, I have a little anxiety about coming together. And John, I absolutely understand, as I've been handing out packets and iPads and serving lunches every day, that we put ourselves at risk, but we also mitigate those as much as we possibly can. So with that, I'm going to mute myself, as my kids wish they had this button.
Well, with all the silence, I'll break it. I'm cool if we can come up with a plan to do it distributed learning, if you will. I think we could do that, Dan. I think you got the technical savvy, and obviously Holly does too. I think that the precedent has been set to do an interview, and I do think that we need to fill the position. It's kind of a black eye on our district right now. So the one thing that I would like to recommend is, being a person who's been on the other side of that table going through this process, that we don't do the interviews in mass. And I talked to Sam Blasey today about this process, and I think you actually mentioned this too, Dan, in one of your emails, is that we can schedule the candidates far enough apart to give them access, and with only being able to put one, if we do a physical room, we can only put one in the room anyway, but if we do a digital, then we spread them out intentionally and just say that, hey, we'll reflect poorly on you if you choose to listen in on the interviews and give yourself a unfair advantage. And Sam said that was completely legal to do that. My thought is that we would do that. We'd spread them out so we could do, at the risk of sounding terrible, but a 6-on-1 interview. After we interview the 6 candidates, then we actually take a vote. So each one of the 6 of us would cast a vote anonymously, or not anonymously, but silently. Turn those votes into Danielle, who will capture them and then read them off. So because they have to be public record, and then you don't have influence that way. So then, I would vote for Mickey Mouse and Pete would vote for Donald Duck, and we'd keep working our way around until the 6 votes were cast. The winner, the person who gets the most vote, then Beth would present a motion that the one with the highest number of votes is selected as the new board member. And then we would vote as routine. And I think that's probably the fairest way to do it. I felt that it was, without doing it, without the board being able to go into executive session and discuss things, it was just a very awkward process to be on the other side of the table last time. But as far as where we do it, Beth and Dan, I'll leave that up to you guys. I'll support whatever you want to do there.
I'd really like to do them all in person. I think you get a feel for everybody. I'll just tell everybody I got swabbed tonight, so I'm on quarantine for 3 to 7 days. So I will have to do everything from Zoom or this or whatever. So, but I agree with you, John. I think we should do it like we did the superintendent. All 6, we talk about it, and then we do the next one. That way, and I don't know, Dan or Holly, if you could set it up that we do it in 30-minute intervals, that person comes online and we do it. And that way, like you said, John, somebody doesn't have an advantage to the questions. But that's the way I'm going to have to go now with the position I'm in.
Holly, Holly, text me a couple things that there are some opportunities. There's a waiting room that we could put folks in. And then the one question I have that I don't know the answer to, John, because this is something that I haven't dealt with, is that vote piece where you send those to Danielle in order to read, and then that person, whoever has the most, I'd want to make sure I ran that by KASB to make sure that is not a secret ballot type of vote that we're taking. And so you maybe already asked Sam that question.
I did. We can do anything that we want to. The only thing that we have to do is there has to be a motion that Mickey Mouse is selected as the new board member. It has to be seconded in discussion and voted. He said what we do up to that time is completely up to us. And the reason I pressed him on the whole executive session thing, and it's not because of their position in the community, it's because they just don't, the rules that regard executive session don't apply here. So yes, we'd have to mess with the digits here. And I think Holly's already coming up with a plan. I can see her eyes moving back and forth. The only thing that he said is that the vote has to have a name attached to it. So whether it's a text message or if there's a point-to-point messaging system on here, that we would send that to Danielle, and then she would open it up and say, John Dalby casts his vote for Mickey Mouse, and then so forth through all 6 people. Yeah. And then you don't have influence. It's the people vote for what's on their heart, and then you get what you get.
There is a private message on here that we could do, so that is capable through Zoom.
This Zoom thing's pretty cool.
So in that scenario, John, what happens then if it comes down to 3-3? Do we just kind of go back? I mean,
yeah, it's just like any other, until it becomes a motion, we just revisit it. Because when there's a motion, and that's another reason why these ballots are good. When it's a motion, if it's a tie, it fails. So
okay.
If we have a tie vote for Mickey Mouse, then no matter what we do next, Mickey Mouse cannot be the next board member. So even if there's yeah, you're with me.
This is Beth. I think doing it electronically is probably going to be the best way to do it at this time, especially, John, if you're quarantined. Because if your swab comes back positive, you're going to be quarantined for a lot longer than a few days. And I think everybody needs to be involved in the decision-making process.
True. It could be up to 14 after that. So
yeah.
So is everybody good with electronically?
I am. I took notes from my conversation with Sam, and Beth, I'll if it's okay with you, I'll send it to Dan and he can share it with the group. It's not binding, of course. It's just the notes that I took, so you guys can consider it.
I agree with you quite heartily. When we do those interviews and it's all of us and everyone else and we go around the room and it looks like a forum, it's pretty awful. having been on the other side from you, it's awful. I agree.
Yeah, I'm sure it even made you guys feel uncomfortable.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay, I'll shoot this to Dan for distribution.
And then Daniel, check with Sam and make sure our interpretation of it is okay.
Yes, I will. The
What
other
do you
part,
think, Aaron?
I'm good with that. I haven't sat across from it. I haven't experienced it like you and Mr. Dolby have. But if it was painful for both of you, one on one side and one on the other, I'll side with the least painful method.
It was painful. Michelle?
I do want to, I'm really good at devil's advocate sometime, and Kerry will shake his head, painfully so, as you sit through an admin meeting. But the one thing that can happen, and this is an evil of electronics, is that we could have that person in a waiting room, and we don't know who Shep is, and we don't know who Atkins is, and we don't know who Aaron Edwards truly is. And just realize that is, I'm not saying anybody would do that. I'm saying that is a possibility, just from students at times that turn in somebody else's homework.
Well,
And
how
so,
is that mitigated when you drag that person into the interview room?
Well,
They're-
I think what he's
you
saying
can
is that
direct them to
when you enter Zoom, you can enter your own name. So you could enter a false name and actually be someone different. So
I see.
someone could misrepresent themselves and be in the room listening if they really wanted to.
Sure, gotcha.
And it's an open meeting, so they can, they just can.
Yeah.
I think that's the other part, is that it is an open meeting. So all of the other folks are able to listen to that. And then on a sidebar is Holly, you should be scared that you speak Dan, just saying.
Okay. Do we need to vote on that, Dan, or we just set it up?
I don't think there's anything that we have to vote on. Is our procedure will be as we might want to, as presented by John. That way we have it on record that this is what we're planning on doing.
Hey, John, you want to state that as a motion?
Yes, thank you. So, so I move that we adopt the course of action that I briefed as our method for selecting the Board of Education, pending legal approval by KSB legal staff.
I will
Second.
second that.
Everybody.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Dalby, aye.
Jill, I.
Aaron, I.
Beth,
John
aye.
Haddock, aye.
Robinson, aye.
Okay, that's everybody, so motion passes. And then the thing that's left on the agenda is I really need your evaluations of Dan. I've heard from Pete and Michelle. So I need everybody else's. If you can get it to me by this Friday, that would be awesome.
Okay. Dan, did that come from you?
Yeah,
Yes.
I can resend it if you want me to.
If you would, please.
Yeah, that'd probably be best. I know all of our emails have filled up, something fierce
Right.
lately. So, the only other thing I do, if I can just take like 2 minutes, is all of the work that all of our staff have done in the last week. And I know that board members have said it, but I'd just like it out there too, that it's been inspiring, how everybody stepped up, and all of the meetings.
Mm-hmm.
If they had one, they had 400 last week, and it's been absolutely amazing. But on top of that, we've been serving about 300 meals to 400 meals each and every day. And those things are extremely important. We have people organizing. We have volunteers that are coming in to help, and it's been inspiring, as the superintendent of schools to see all of that from a lot of different people. It's been absolutely amazing. I just want to be able to say that to all of you. I know I send it out all the time. Sometimes it doesn't mean more being heard. So.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.
Dan, I don't know if you heard, but Tonganoxie and Raytown both terminated or closed their lunch program. Do we have a contingency plan in place in case something like that happens where we have someone that gets ill?
Kevin McCarley and I have been working on that along with Jennifer Zool to see. Obviously, you'd be shut down for a little bit of time in order to clean. There is a lot of nervousness about that in our community. The other thing that we're looking at as a contingency is that if we can't provide meals, maybe we can provide food supplements through volunteer service. And so if it's the case that we can't provide meals, maybe we can provide some staples to those that need them. And we've worked with some of our local churches in order to do that. It's just the hard part is getting food and being able to purchase it. But Kevin is reaching out to a couple of the pastors in the community that have said that they'd be willing to do that. So that's kind of, we have some contingencies, including additional people. However, people are going to get sick through this process. We know that. And so people are going to continue to be hungry. So we're going to try to work on the best way to do that, where we don't put people at risk, especially our own employees. And I think that, we can mitigate that as much as possible. But at some point in time, the first couple weeks are going to be easy. But when we get into, as you look at things, 6, 7, 8 weeks, possibly more, the need's going to go up, and the amount of people that can do the work is going to go down. So we're continually, Kevin sends out updates every day, and we reassess our plan every day, and it's continually moving. So from us being able to provide meals to being able to provide food supplements. So,
Gary, how's your food bank doing?
Well,
we could hear you, Carrie.
okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Very well, as far as I know. I've got a call into Shirley. She wants to talk to me about the Lions Pantry. I do know that we've had a few more families that have asked for our services. So that's a good thing that they felt comfortable to reach out to us. So
Yeah.
that ups our numbers for sure.
Yeah. No. Well, you
I
gotta,
have to put a plug in for the Crosswoods Methodist Church. Those people are just fantastic and have partnered with us and just work so well. So
thank you, Carrie.
Is there any other discussion? I moved it. I'm sorry, John, I couldn't hear you.
Do you want a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
I'll motion that we adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Dalby, aye.
Aaron, aye.
And
Robinson,
Beth,
aye.
aye. Got all 5 of us. Motion.
I did just get an email from Aaron Edwards, and the amended MOU did pass from the executive council, so we're good to go.
Wow.
Wow, they're quick.
Quick. All right. Not a bad job for our first run at this.
No, not at all. So we are adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Be safe.
you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
everybody. I don't know how to get out of here.
Watch this.
Meeting on the bottom right.